So narrative is an essential part of the human experience. It's very important for us as we develop to be telling stories that bring people together.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of America, welcome back. Yeah. Men and women, Chris, and women audience, not just males.
Yes.
We've talked about this.
Sorry, women.
Keep that in mind. Welcome back, Chris. How's your day been going?
My day is going swell, but let's not bother the people with just regular days. You're back from vacation.
Yes.
You went to the beach.
Yes. That's correct.
Did you roll around like a powdered donut?
I rolled around on the powder like a beached whale on Gulf Shores, Alabama.
Felt nice.
Lots of people, we said we were going to Gulf Shores, they said we were going to Pensacola.
Oh,
it's not the same place.
Not the same place.
It's not even the same state.
Nothing against Pensacola, right?
No, but everyone kept going, oh, so Florida's going to be great. I'm like, it's Alabama.
Yeah, okay.
So it was great. Great time.
Are you rested? Time. You needed to
I feel
to
rested. I feel like I got some sun, a little tan.
You do look a lot more tan
perhaps
than
a lot?
usual.
Oh, yeah? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's very nice of you.
Freshly tanned.
Yep, feel good. What's the last vacation you took?
Last vacation I took, I can't even remember. I think last October to the mountains, not to the beach, to the mountains. It was wonderful.
Where, Colorado?
It was in Colorado.
Ooh.
It was in southern Colorado. And I saw a bear.
Are you
Saw a big bear.
Did you have the encounter with a bear? Or did you
I
see
did not
a bear?
have an encounter. I saw the bear off in the distance, about 50
like
yards
in a
away.
picture frame?
And we just said respect, and I went my own way. It went its own way.
You guys were like this?
We did. We were like, if people could see, Mike just hit his chest with two fingers, looking very street.
That's what you do when you say respect.
And
Street. Speaking of street, did you realize you said the word swell earlier when we started this episode?
What's wrong with swell?
Isn't that from the 50s?
Trying to bring it back.
Isn't it from the 50s, the 40s?
The old is new.
Speaking of the 1950s, I think that's a great segue for a special guest we have today. Would you like to intro our special guest? Mystery guest?
I would.
Okay.
It is the indomitable Stephen Jones.
Oh, Steve, I thought you were going to say more than that.
No, the reason why I'm going to let you introduce, because you actually have some history with this no longer young man. Well, kind of, he's younger than us, but
young man. You're like 95 years old. Swell and calling a guest young man. Thank you, Stephen, for being here. Yes, this is the one and only,
over here, okay?
The man, the myth, the
here.
legend, respect. Loves the 50s. He also loves the 60s. I would probably say the 70s up to current times.
Probably.
Loves all decades.
Probably.
Stephen Jones.
You have a little history with him, though.
Stephen Jones in the house. I do have some. Some history. We'll let him connect the dots there. Welcome.
I definitely have no bad memories from the 50s, 60s, or 70s.
Yes, all good memories for you. Yes, that's very exciting. So Chris wanted to know, can he call you Stephen? Is that the correct?
That is allowed. I feel like we should get out ahead of this now, because at least 10% of your audience just lean forward. Like, how did they get Stephen Jones? I do not own any portion of the Dallas Cowboys.
I don't know about that. Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure we are unrelated to those Joneses.
You would have to know.
You're 99% sure.
He buries me very effectively on the Google search. And it's not even spelled the same. Mine is with a V.
Do you search your name often on the Google search to see where your ranking
Not
is?
in many years.
Okay. It's been a while.
But
about 7 years ago, you had a wild...
You have that period in your 20s where you think you're a really big deal. Unfortunately, the internet is here to humble all of us.
Yes. Very true. What would be your good street name? Because Stephen Jones does sound that you could be confused for the Cowboys.
You're going very street today.
It sounds very legal. Yeah. It's a very legal name, which is fine. Thank you, legalities. But what's your street? You're walking down the streets of, let's say, Grapevine, just throwing out the city as an example, and you're like, yo.
Yeah, pretend Mike has just hit his chest with two fingers and he's calling out to you. What's he saying?
I honestly, if someone did that to me, I would be like checking over my shoulder, like who are they talking to? Because it's not me. There's no way it would be me. I don't know. There was a period of time where I actually was on the radio.
Yep.
I had a local radio show at CBS
DJ
Radio.
Name. You had a DJ name.
I had a DJ name because our program manager thought that like Steven was too commonplace, but I was too young to be Steve. So he decided that I needed to be Stevie, which...
DJ Stevie?
Yeah.
No, just Stevie. Just straightforward. Because nobody actually says DJ anymore.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm old.
Yeah, it's like...
I didn't say disc jockey. I'm at least saying DJ.
In radio now.
Yeah.
And that's really like so much of radio now is about, as the kids would say, authenticity. And so a lot of times they want you to sound as natural as possible, except that you can't have normal people names like Steven.
Yeah.
You have to.
That'd be ridiculous. You
Yeah,
need to be
who
Stevie.
would listen to a Steven on the radio?
So never Stevie J?
No SJ.
No, just...
Yeah, see, I was going to work in the J. You and I, look
you
at
would
that.
think,
No, okay. All right, cool.
Would have been nice.
Yeah.
But it was funny because like even in the training they would tell you like if you make a little mistake, if it's a big mistake, go back and clean it up. If you make a little mistake, just leave it in. Because people want it. They want the
realness.
They want the authenticity.
Now it
People
sounds
are
like
used
it's live.
I think people are used to mistakes on this podcast. So that is one thing that we have really brought to the table.
We'll make some today.
We've already made a lot just
We've got
talking
the
about your name, so we should probably move on to other things.
If you haven't made a mistake, you're not learning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Kids, listen to Stephen Jones, Stevie J, DJ Steve J, DJ Steve J,
DJ SJ.
Oh my goodness, it's coming! It's happening.
This sounds like something that they would do for me as an example of how not to do radio. Like I had a guy that sort of took me under his wing when I first started, and he would do air checks with me and show me what I was doing wrong, which was most of it. And his example was always like, never do the radio voice. And I was like, what radio voice? There's not a radio voice. And he'd be like, coming at you live from the air check. Nobody talks like that on the radio.
Oh, that's true.
Respect.
I'm going to not change my voice as we talk. Do I do that ever? Do I become a radio guy?
I have no place to talk as people...
I kind of came in saying, all right. Like, oh, jeez.
Yeah.
We're
I'm still
really
fighting
doing
off
terrible.
the old Chris has a sexy voice thing. So
That's true. Sexy Chris is actually the nickname he got when we first started the podcast. So when we've had other guests on, we sometimes will kind of pepper some guests with some questions.
Pepper time.
So a little bit of rapid fire in the front and rapid fire at the end. Because it's a twist. You would have never saw
like
that
food
coming.
Poisoning.
Yeah, basically. We
Very much.
We provide food poisoning for our guests.
Yeah.
That's a new way of saying it I haven't thought about. So
I was going to say appetizers, but in a different way. I'm just not going to say it. So, okay.
Yeah, I
it's
ruined
very
that
fitting.
for
It's
you.
very
I'm
fitting.
sorry.
Chris is going to throw some appetizers at you. Go.
Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, or Harry Potter?
And you have to pick one.
I have to pick one.
Yes.
Okay.
Can't like them all.
I definitely... Are we talking movies or books?
We're talking
or,
rapid
like, the whole
fire.
franchise?
Star Wars, Lord
There's
of
no
the Rings,
follow-up
or
questions,
Harry
man.
Potter.
There's no, you just
let's not
answer
get
the
specific.
thing. No.
I grew up on Star Wars. That was my thing. So that's probably the franchise that I would take.
Boom.
Well enough. What was your first job?
My first job, I actually sacked groceries at Market Street in Colleyville.
I sacked groceries in my first job. Hold on. But except mine was at Kroger. But we are both fellow grocery sackers.
Yeah.
That's a great thing.
It's a really good
is a
way
great
to
day for
start.
Did you ever
America.
have meat fall down the front of your shirt, down into your nether parts?
That was not when I was sacking groceries. Someone was not paying attention. That was stocking at another
I'm
random
just
job.
asking him if he ever had meat fall down the front of his shirt.
Very different thing. No, I did not. I never had that. I did
Okay.
have once. So Market Street, their whole thing is that you walk the cart out and then you bring
That's
it
right.
back
Yes.
for the guest.
I had to do that too.
And they liked for you to run the carts back.
Really?
Yes, because hustle was a big deal, and I guess the 30 seconds that you saved running across the parking lot was really
And the
big in the
sweat
company's
you're
bottom
providing.
line.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the thing they didn't think about was I had this like huge curly afro that would like fluff up in the wind and then sweat dripping down my face.
That
So I
sounds
probably
fun to
shouldn't have been
watch.
running.
That sounds
Wow.
fancy. Yeah.
Wow.
But the big mistake that I made was trying to run the cart back in the middle of like rapid onset blizzard that came through while we were still open, and I couldn't see the curb, so I was running and then I was flying, and then I was on my back.
The blizzard that we've had in Texas, like one time in a millennia.
And I
like,
just happened to be working that day. I know, what are the odds?
Did the afro cushion the fall in any way? I just want to
I
know.
like to
Fair
think
question.
that it prevented brain damage.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go with that.
And that was why the Lord blessed me with the curly hair.
did you
Yeah.
ever have one
God works in mysterious
customer?
ways.
Did you ever have one customer ever ask you to bag the groceries in plastic, but to put it in paper? Or the other way around, put it in paper, but then put that in plastic.
We did have some really specific ones, and it was actually part of the training when you had raw meats. You'd ask if they wanted those separated in plastic.
Yes.
So a
Raw
lot of
meat
times
is
you would
a
wrap
factor.
it and put it at the bottom
Yep.
of the bag, and then you could.
You still remember this.
Could
So look
stack
how
it.
effective that job
I was
was.
You can
effectively
do that
trained.
right
Wow.
now.
Wow.
You could walk into a store right now and say, "I've got this." Right?
I could, in fact, a large portion of store design now depends on us knowing how to do that because now there's all the automated checkout.
Don't make it ridiculous, Chris. This is a serious situation. Wow. Why don't you go to your
Stuff you
next
learn.
question?
Yeah.
Since you're
Do you
so silly.
speak any other languages,
So
SJ?
I took Spanish in high school and was actually I had gotten proficient enough to pass the AP test, and I was really proud of that. And then I decided in college that I wanted an extra challenge, and stupidly took Mandarin. So now I speak neither well. And what will happen is I'll start a sentence in one and then finish it in the other because my brain's like, oh, out of words. Try this one.
Wow. That's impressive, though.
kind
You
of
can, well, I mean, you're
Spanish-Mandarin
technically
combo?
speaking both languages. Let me ask you a question.
Spandarin?
Donde está Maria?
I actually don't know, Maria.
Someday someone's going to get this question correct.
We'll try.
They say
Ni hao ma.
Is that Mandarin?
Yeah.
If that wasn't Mandarin, you just did
It's
something
how are
really
you-
unethical on the podcast.
How are
so
you doing?
was it? Oh, that was real?
That was
Yeah,
real.
they-
Okay.
That was real. That was.
Okay.
That was
You know that one, but you don't know Donde está Maria?
Well, I mean, everybody knows Donde está.
Oh, I thought he was going to say, he was like, everyone knows. I thought he was going to do it. Fine, go to the next question.
What's a place you've been to that you loved?
I
Like
love.
loved.
Love.
There's a big long
Radio
list,
voice.
but I'll go ahead and break out the big brag now. So my wife Lauren and I went to Iceland a couple of summers
Wow.
ago,
Nice. Yeah,
and that was incredible.
I imagine. Saw the Northern Lights.
We did not, so we went in the summer. And actually, Iceland is not as good for watching the northern lights as like Canada or Alaska are, just because of its positioning for some reason. We saw them recorded in like an IMAX theater.
Okay.
That was our cheat code. All the things we couldn't get to, we went to. There's a museum that has like all of the attractions in Iceland
Yeah.
in one place. So we were like, all the stuff we couldn't do, we're
yeah,
gonna do.
we're going to check all the boxes
today.
on our last day.
Did you clap your hands in unison with a crowd of people?
I don't think that
Is
that's.
that what Iceland is known for?
They're every time
It's
they're in
the
a sporting
Viking
event,
clap.
the Viking
Yeah.
clap.
You're talking like the...
It's like a world.
No, we're
Cup
talking here.
thing.
Steven, do it with me. Ready? Ready? Go.
Oh.
Yeah,
What?
it's a slow build.
Oh, it's... Okay.
And
It
you have,
just
you have
keeps
to do
going.
kind of like a big, like a guttural.
Yeah, it's very
I
Viking.
mean, I was
Thanks.
excited to do it until we just did that.
Yeah,
and
I-
that was terrible.
That
So-
It works a lot better in
That's
a
kinda
stadium
worse
with like
than-
Okay.
20,000 plus.
if only we had more than just 3 people in the
I
room.
think we could fit them in here.
We'll stick with the two
Man,
fingers on the
Iceland's
chest. Respect. There we
Iceland's
go.
great.
All right.
I heard Iceland. I've heard good things about it. Really green, luscious green, if you will.
It's like the famous original PR move is that the Vikings, when they made it to Greenland, were like, "Oh, this is really icy. We should call it Greenland, so people will leave Iceland and come here." They'll be like, "How is it greener than Iceland?"
Get them to actually leave, and then no one will go to Iceland. That's
And
fine.
once they're there, they're stuck. So
Yeah. Wow.
Iceland is
Iceland,
ours.
Iceland would be awesome to go to. You put that on the bucket list.
Yeah, let's do that.
What were you
So
gonna say?
after you're done rolling around on the beach like a powdered donut, let's
Yep.
go to.
Yeah, I already did that. So I did that
Iceland.
last week.
Yeah.
So now I'm ready to go. Are we
Iceland's
going to
up.
Iceland together?
I wasn't planning on it, but
Oh, you said
maybe
we.
you go and then I can go and then
I'll give you
we'll
a
compare
review.
notes.
I'll give you a review.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Be Vikings.
Oh dear.
That is all that I have as far as, and thank you, SJ, for
Finger guns.
appetizing.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's get into the meat.
Let's get into the meat. Kick us off into the meat.
Well, tell us a little bit about the history here between.
There's not this massive history
well,
here.
you were in a leadership role. What was
Back in the
young
day,
Steven? What was young
many
SJ
many
like back
years
then?
ago, many moons ago, I was in student leadership. So Steven here, we'll call him Steven. That's his name, sitting right in front of us. He was a fellow student. He was not in my small group because I kind of saw the way he was interacting. It's like, I don't know.
He was a
not
fellow
that group.
student.
He was. Oh yeah, sorry. No. He was a student. I was a leader. Thanks for.
I'm trying
thanks
to
for-
paint the picture.
Words are
I'm trying
hard
to paint
sometimes.
the
Okay,
picture. That's what I'm here
relax.
for.
So in student ministry, let's see. What do I remember? of Stephen Jones. A lot of hair. Glasses.
Was
For
the afro
sure.
in effect at that time?
it would vary based on the year. So
yeah.
like junior high, it was
wasn't
a lot
like
smaller.
massive afro.
High school, I was in like a spirit team thing where the tradition was to grow out your hair through the football season, and then at the end, if we made it to state, they would shave your head in a
Okay.
pep rally. So I had like an insane amount of hair because that was the year. So I went to Trinity High School in Euless.
Yeah.
That was the year we were projected to win the mythical national championship. We lost to Allen, and it didn't happen.
Boo.
But then, like, we all had grown out our hair, and we lost in like the regional semis or something.
That's another thing we have in common. We both went to Trinity.
And
Did not know. No.
Oh.
I'm better for that now.
you got all this hair, and you're like, well, I don't want to cut it myself because they were supposed to cut it for me later. And so we all just had like depression froze.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's
everybody
where you want to be in high school. It's really how you want to
Yeah,
feel.
it's great.
Yeah.
It's great. I was like fresh off a breakup. Yeah.
You're like, it's just nice and depressed here. with My
I
long
was,
hair.
I was like the inspirational teen movie in reverse. Like they put the glasses on me and they put the hair in my face.
I do remember a lot of depression. So Stephen Jones, student ministry, depression all the time, lots of hair.
That was it.
Good things like that.
Yep.
What was Mike like?
Oh,
Back then? No, let's-
I don't know.
Turn the
He's
table.
probably not going to remember any of this.
No?
He's had a long life since then.
I feel like Mike had the same energy then that he does now.
Wow.
Did
thank
you have the same
I'm growing.
frosty tips there?
They're
Apollo?
not
I
frosted
don't. I
tips.
think Mike is legally mandated to keep that hairstyle
Yeah.
for the entirety of
I
his
think
life.
he's actually right. I haven't found that contract, but it seems like ever since I was 16,
It was like it was shoehorned into. You know how they put like a bunch of stuff in every
Yeah.
bill they pass in the legislature. It was just like one
That
of
was-
those.
Yeah, there was
Thanks.
legislature on my hair. So I haven't changed at all. So I really haven't matured as a man either. Apparently, since I was 20 something.
I
years
think we're
old.
the better for it.
I'd
Actually.
be able to speak to that more if we were in the same group, but I don't.
Yeah.
I knew you mostly from a distance in
Yeah.
that weird role you have to do when you're like leadership position with young people where you have to pretend you have the same amount of energy that they have. So Mike did a really good job of pretending to be a supernova human and
That's
then
the acting
probably
experience right
going
there.
home and
Yeah.
sleeping.
Oh yeah, I was passing out pretty much in the car as soon as student ministry is over. That's the acting experience.
Yeah, that-
Isn't really life all of a performance?
I think you would make a great student leader.
Thank you.
So,
Like in
Yeah.
real life or in acting?
both.
Okay.
Yeah, if there were a movie
Yeah.
about a student leader, I could see you
Thank
play
you.
that role really well.
Thank you. Do you guys have any history together?
No, actually, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand. The first life group that I was a part of here at 121, my wife and I were both part of a couples group. And your mother and father were part of that group. And so we had some good time with them and didn't really know you well. But we talked about running in similar circles. Know a lot of people in common. We had both experience in nonprofit, which is what I kind of wanted to talk about here a little bit. You have had some experience there. Wanted to find out a little bit more about what that was like, what led you into nonprofit. We'll get into the role that you're playing now because it's not necessarily nonprofit, but yeah. What take us back a little bit to some of what led you into those early roles.
Starting with the day you were born.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
the moment after.
Fast forward. Yeah, fast forward to.
Yeah.
I need you to get your
beyond, Mike.
mind into October 1990.
Okay.
I'm there.
It's a glorious day.
It's
Oh,
a
yeah.
glorious day. So we'll skip ahead a little bit.
Just a
to
little.
Save your audience having to deal with any more of my high school angst. I graduated college with a degree in communication studies, which is like such a niche degree with such simple requirements that most people like choose it by accident after they've been at school 2 years and realize they need to get all the credits together to graduate.
Yeah.
But I came in with a bunch of credits from AP and like advanced placement classes and knowing that I wanted that degree. So I actually graduated in 3.5 years because like they ran out of stuff for me to do. They're
Yeah.
like, we didn't plan on you actually wanting this.
You're the first person in the history of
This is for
college.
people who came to college to find themselves. And we're done extracting money from them. So I guess they can go with the comms degree.
You're not going according to plan.
So yeah, what do? You're going to save money. Stop it. So as a kid, I always wanted to write. I thought, novelist, and then I found out that was really hard. So I thought journalist, which is a super stable career that is definitely still profitable today. We have a very healthy media ecosystem. So I went to college thinking I wanted to do that. and ended up sort of between high school and college really falling in love with the concept of radio, which is another medium that is not at all dying or challenged because of the advancement of technology. I was a child with big dreams.
Yeah, picking the right stuff. Yeah.
Really crushing it. So I graduated and did what all millennials did and came home to crash on my parents' couch until I could afford rent. And that just so happened to be here in DFW, which happens to be a top 5 radio market. It's one of the biggest metro areas in the U.S. because Dallas and Fort Worth cluster so effectively. So I ended up getting an entry-level job at CBS Radio in downtown Dallas, which is a really great place to start. But everyone in radio starts at the same bottom tier of the ladder, where you're on the promotions team and you're handing out koozies and waking up at 3 a.m. to go and set up for the 5 a.m. broadcast team. So it's a lot, but one of the gentlemen who ran one of the stations there sort of offered at the all-hands meeting that if anybody wanted to learn how to run the board or how to do like on-air stuff, you could come talk to him. And I guess I was the only person insane enough to take him up on that offer. So I went to him. He showed me around the board, and they liked me enough to let me start messing around super late at night, like midnight to 2 a.m. So no one is listening. You can make as many mistakes as you want. And that was the most empowering thing he said to me. He set me down at the board, and he was like, you've been through everything. You know how to do everything. You're going to mess up.
Yeah.
And we expect you to mess up.
Yeah.
So just like get it out
Tabula
of your
rasa
system.
there. Yeah.
And I was like, cool, sounds fun. So I did that for a while, turned in air checks until they were convinced I knew what I was doing enough to have a weekend shift. So I ended up with a 7 to midnight slot on Saturdays at 103.7 KBIL, which is the legacy station here. Yeah. Used to carry the Cowboys that my family doesn't own. So I was running that show for a while, which is awesome because this is the point, again, if this is a movie, this is the big inspirational moment where the nerd has gotten the hair out of his face and the glasses off and he's found himself and he's doing his dream job and what he loves to do. I hated every second of it.
Oh, man.
I was going to ask you what theme music's playing during that time, but probably nothing that you were really... sad trumpets. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Every
day when you walk into the studio. So I was getting this like crushing anxiety when I started show prepping. And I was like, I don't feel like your dream job should make you feel like this. It seems like it's wrong.
Like it's the opposite, I think.
And then because, again, of our super healthy media ecosystem, the way that an on-air personality creates value for a company now is that you supplement their social media presence and you create content for their website. And most of the content we created for the website was basically what did TMZ write and how can we rewrite in a way that we can't get
like
sued.
Fun and
so much fun. Yeah. So your on-air shift was like you would talk for a total of 3 minutes, introduce Katy Perry 4 times in the span of 6 hours, and then churn out an article an hour, usually about Kim Kardashian. And I was like, this doesn't feel like it's really helping anyone. It feels pretty unhelpful and unimportant. And like many people in my generation, I have that archetype where what the work accomplishes is more important to me than any other element of the work. I want it to make an impact. I want it to contribute to society in some way. And I was getting the sense that I was sort of doing the opposite of that, churning out useless pop culture content. So I was talking about that with my family, and one of my sisters actually said, it sounds like what you want to do is community organizing. So I like Googled what is community organizing, and stumbled across Six Stones, which is a nonprofit that was founded in 2009, same year I graduated high school, and they like launched in a building across the street. From my high school.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a weird small world scenario. Emailed one of the gentlemen on staff there and basically said like, hey, can you teach me what you do? Because this worked in the radio job. Like, I just asked a nice old man to teach me things.
And they gave you a show.
Did.
Right, there you go.
And slowly I developed. So I thought maybe if I ask a nice, not old man, the same thing will happen.
Yeah, sure.
He ended up being my supervisor for a few years, and he was wonderful. But for a while, I was kind of doing both jobs. I was working part-time at Six Stones, part-time at the radio station. and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And actually, one of the guys at CBS, a gentleman by the name of Jeff Skin Wade. I don't know if you've heard of Jeff Skin Wade.
That sounds like is that a superhero name or a villain name?
I'm going.
I know you're talking about, but when you
superhero.
think the full name, not serial killer either. It's 3 names.
Oh, I said superhero.
Superhero.
You heard serial killer.
Jeff
so,
Skin Wade.
Yep.
That sounds like a bad guy.
Of the Ben
Serial
and Skin
killer.
Show.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was at the phase where I was networking because I was hoping to get a more relevant air gig. A lot of times what you do in radio is you drop to a lower market for a better airtime where you can build up your resume. So at the time I was still kind of exploring that path. And a lot of the people that I talked to said, just ask people if you can buy them coffee or lunch. And most of them will say yes. And most of them are nice enough that they will pay for it. And if they don't, like, you have to be prepared to do that.
Sure.
But shockingly, this guy who's like an incredible professional broadcaster, he's got decades of experience. He hosts Mav games. And
Yep.
Ben and Skin is probably one of the more decorated shows in this market, and they've successfully spun off a new podcast. He agreed to just have lunch with me, and he kind of cut me off in the middle of my "here's what I'm hoping for" pitch, and he was like, "What is your radio show? Like, if you had a radio show, what would you want it to be?"
Good question.
And I sort of described it to him, and it was about like bringing people together and like mobilizing the community. He's like, "Yeah, get out. You're gonna hate this job."
Wow.
Which was like, it hurt to hear, but it was one of the most important things
Sure.
that anyone could say. And
Sure.
honestly, like, props to him for just cutting right to the point.
Yeah.
So I transitioned away from the radio job into the nonprofit job. And at the time, it was like a small part-time gig where I had essentially walked into their office after meeting them once and said, "Here's what I'm good at. And I've reviewed all of your communications channels, and here's what you're not good at. And they're the same things. So can I do them for you?"
Yeah.
And they
So
were
you have
like,
the answer with you. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
100%.
started me part-time, and I eventually generated enough stuff to justify a full-time position, and grew into what was then called the storyteller position, which sounds made up because we made it up to describe what it was that I was doing.
Yep. So why the passion for community, bringing people together? Like, because, you talked to Skin, like, you could have stayed in radio. Obviously, you said, you hated it, so you knew that. But, like, what is it about bringing people together? Like, you talked about that for your radio show. Why does that move the needle for you?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one, that is my personality archetype. Like, there's so many personality quizzes now that you can go out and figure out who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very highly driven by a sense of community, a sense of connection, and the idea that all things are connected in some way. I would argue it's because they're designed to be connected.
Mhm.
Some people might disagree, and that's
Sure.
fine.
Sure.
But I think in a lot of ways, what we as people need is connection to each other. And what we as a society, whether you're talking about our national culture or global culture, is a level of connection that mobilizes everyone to the point that we can accomplish more.
Yeah.
The individual is not nearly as capable as the collective.
Yep.
So for me, it's a matter of bringing those people together and advancing all of us in a way that benefits all of us. Now,
Mhm.
to some degree, I think that is the calling of the church,
Sure.
and that's something that Christ calls us to.
Yeah.
That's, in a word, that is the kingdom, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to bring people together and move a little closer to the way we're supposed to be.
100%.
So I think that's part of it. But even I've gotten so used at this point to having to explain Christological things in a secular way, because not everyone has my worldview, and it's important that we can kind of find common ground.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That's,
Right. So I think we don't succeed, and we can't be truly healthy and truly flourishing unless everyone is capable of contributing something.
Yeah.
And we're all advancing together.
I love
I
that.
would agree with that. Yeah. What do
We
you
talked
think
about
that?
this recently
Mhm.
about, and you said something here that reminded me of that, is that, asking for help. You asked for help. You got some guidance and some counsel there, and it was offered to you in a way where it actually helped you to have kind of your own show in a way as a storyteller. And so here you are, a nonprofit as a storyteller. What kind of stories are you telling in that role?
So that was a fun one because I think they had a sense that it was something they should be doing, but they didn't really know where to start. And my career, even up till now, is really stepping into roles that are sort of ill-defined that no one's ever done before and trying to figure out what does this even look like,
Right.
get your arms around it and find the shape of it and build it from the ground up. So I think anyone who's ever worked in nonprofit will tell you that the story side of things is the most important part, because if people don't understand what you're doing and what it's accomplishing, then the organization crumbles. I mean, one, you can't get funding, but two, you can't mobilize volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard, even with the staff, to get a picture of what is it that we're trying to do. And everybody wants that sense of accomplishment. We've talked about it previously, that you need to feel like you're contributing to a goal. You need to feel like what you're doing matters. And so in some ways, the stories that we started telling were as much for the staff as they were for our volunteers and our general audience, because I think they needed to be encouraged that what they were doing mattered and made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And the beautiful thing about Six Stones is it's a volunteer and community platform. So it was designed in conversation with leaders from all over Hurst, Euless, and Bedford, the community that it serves. So school district, city management, high stakes or stakeholders who have high positions. What needs have they identified, and how do we build a program to match those needs?
Yeah.
So we did so many things. It was hard not to find a story somewhere. So we were doing home renovations for people who are physically and financially unable to keep their houses up to code. We did emergency food and clothing support. We did school supplies and Christmas for at-risk kids in the local school district. There was counseling available for the folks who come in to the food pantry. And then while I was there, we launched a mentoring program to try to do that next step out of poverty. And we also had an intramural soccer league, which I'm sure we'll unpack more in later questions. So the fun thing about that was you kind of had a seasonal rotation of stories where whatever event was coming up, those were the stories you were going to go out and find and tell.
Yep.
So I was interviewing homeowners and students or teachers who had been recipients of school supplies or Christmas. And I think a lot of what I loved about that job was that these are such small things that make such big impacts.
Yeah, you've come a long way at that point from TMZ rehashing of the type of content to stories that matter. And so it just sounds like it has the makings for a storyteller to be able to tell a lot of different stories, content for days. And so what surprises you in that role as you're taking on and you're telling these stories and you're keeping the staff encouraged, you're letting the community know more about Six Stones as well? What surprises come out of that?
I think one of the things, so when I started, we were figuring out what my role was, but I think we were still figuring out what Six Stones was, because it hadn't even turned 10 years old yet. It had been launched really with all of this community feedback and sort of saying yes to everything at the outset, and then having to pare down programs based on what's actually having an impact, what's working, what matches the vision of the community. Yeah. So we were in the middle of figuring out what are we good at? What should we be doing? What do we need to say no to? And one of the things that was really beautiful as we got into it was discovering this sort of rich theology of service where, yes, we were meeting physical needs of people that you would consider at risk or low income, but the equally important side of the ministry that was never discussed until we really started digging into it was that the people who volunteer with us or who donate with us are also being fed spiritually. They had a need as well. And it's really easy, especially in this area where it's so easy to get into an affluent bubble, to be separated from a whole nother reality of existence and to just go through life completely self-sufficient, at least financially and having all of your basic needs met,
Sure.
and not realizing how much you're missing on a community level, on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
And the people that we would interview are people that would come to us twice a week to get food, that would have to go out into the community garden and grow their own produce because otherwise they couldn't get any food. And they had these incredibly rich relationships with the Lord and some just beautiful wisdom that you don't attain sitting in a safe bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that we would think of as not being needy had a desperate need to be in conversation
Yep.
with the people that we were serving. And ideally, you would want them to actually be in a room together and like, actually share communion. But I think a video or a blog is a good first step to really opening up people's minds and hearts and letting them
Showing
see
what's possible there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so, how many years are you there at Six Stones in that role? And then what helps you transition out to your next?
So I started in 2015 at Six Stones and transitioned out in 2019, moving into 2020 for a couple of reasons. The chief one is that I got married. And when your life is not just you anymore, you have to do a lot of calculations about what a paycheck you need to sustain life, and B, what do your work hours look like? Because the thing about the job that I had was that I would go out and collect interviews, and then I would be up editing, and we would do events sometimes, like Night of Hope at Christmas. Those parties don't end until 9 or 10 p.m., and then I would be home editing video and photos, and I would go to bed at like midnight and wake up at 10, and then cut things together. So my hours would vary wildly. And I'm also a perfectionist and a procrastinator, which is a dangerous combination. So every now and again, like my hours would vary because of me being bad at managing time. And I could not effectively share a life with somebody splitting those hours. But it also happened that around the same time I was starting to think about a career transition, the city of Grapevine came on board as a community-powered revitalization partner with Six Stones. So we started doing volunteer events here in the city, keeping some of the older houses up to code. And to announce that we were expanding the program to include Grapevine, we did a driving interview with the mayor pro tem. So we hopped in the car with her, and she just drove us around the city and like showed us all the places that this work was needed. Because again, when you get in that bubble, you don't think that the need exists.
Yeah.
Grapevine is a prosperous city. You would not think there's a pocket where those kinds of services were needed, but they were. So we did a really great feature with her, and she was just so excited about it that she immediately started looking for like job openings where she could plug me in. So I got connected to the economic development team of all people, which is not at all what I'm doing at the nonprofit side of things. But at the time, the department was 3 guys who were all like introverted, data-heavy guys, not narrative, not sociable, not high empathy. And I have like problematically high empathy. So we would do like the staff surveys at Six Stones, and they'd be like, okay, if you're on this level, if you're highly logical, go over here. And if you're in the middle, go over here. And I would always be like by myself at the other side of the room, that I'm like exceptionally empathetic. So I process everything emotionally first. And then I have to remind myself that logic is a thing. And like,
great self-awareness.
I should apply it. But it's an important mindset for the kinds of work that I do. So what we were looking at as I came into the department was finding a way to marry the incredible resources and the data that the city has with the more narrative framework that my brain likes to follow, and try to tell data-driven stories that communicate a broader truth than just the numbers alone.
Is that what you're still doing?
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
Which is, it's funny moving from a nonprofit team of, I think we had either 16 or 12 by the time that I rolled off. Staff changed a couple of times, and coming into a department of 3 people.
Yeah.
but much more heavily resourced because it's part of a really big entity in the city, which is like a top 10 employer within the geopolitical boundaries of Grapevine. So there's a whole lot of people, but our department is small. And I have more resources than ever, but fewer people around me than ever. I'm kind of trying to find my footing. You have to figure a lot of things out as you go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I was really hired with the understanding that we only have a vague idea what this job looks like, and we're going to kind of piece it together as we go.
Yep.
The gentleman who hired me, unfortunately, had some personal things going on and ended up sort of stepping away and moving back to be with family like 2 weeks after he hired me.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah.
So we had some fun sort of stitching the job together. So the next director was hired and we ironed some stuff out. He got a job offer in LA and he left, which is like, it's a dream job to run the economic development department in Los Angeles. So we're not mad at all.
Yeah.
He took that opportunity.
Yeah, of course.
And then they promoted somebody up from within the department to run the department. And he's doing a fantastic job now. So in the span of 3 years, I had 3 different bosses and they all kind of had different vision of what the job was going to look like. But the core of it has always been, how do we tell the story of Grapevine? Because it's such a unique city that the numbers alone don't really do it justice. And it has such a rich history that you sort of have to put all of the facts about it in context, because otherwise you can't really appreciate them for the power that they have.
Yeah. Grapevine certainly has been growing in popularity too from outside of Texas. And so what have you seen? What is in store for Grapevine as we go forward into the next, 5 to 10 years? What do you foresee happening here with this?
Yeah, so we're at a really interesting point in the history of Grapevine where generally when you think of economic development, and I'm going to speak about this as though I'm an expert, even though really...
Once you say economic development, you already sound like an expert.
Yeah,
so
those are 2 really big words. That's like so many syllables.
Yeah, if you just keep working that into the sentences, everyone's going to believe you know what you're saying.
So I'm really the communications and marketing arm of the department. So all of the actual economic development stuff, I trust to the experts, and then I just go and tell people how smart the experts are. That's my job, essentially. But the general approach to economic development, at least as you'll hear it in the news, is cities money whipping companies to come and build their headquarters. That's not really the case in Grapevine, and it's especially not going to be the case as we move forward because we're almost out of land to develop.
Yep.
Excluding land that is controlled by DFW Airport, the city of Grapevine's like 97% built. So we're shifting from a phase of attraction, which we're still working on. And we have some really cool projects in the pipeline that I'm not allowed to talk about.
Sure. Ooh, classified information.
Classified information.
Wow.
We're shifting from that to more of a redevelopment, sustainment, and expansion model where we need to support the companies that are here. We need to find ways to elevate the workforce, the existing businesses, so that they can continue to thrive because there's more than one way to grow an economy, right? You can bring money and businesses in. You can also help the businesses that are here grow and expand. Right. So we're going to have some redevelopment opportunities. We have a couple of key quarters that we're working on now. There's a parcel of land on the northeast corner of the city that the city owns and controls and that has not been developed. We're working on getting a couple of really cool users installed up there. We have some redevelopment going on along Dallas Road, which is right in the middle of the city, right next to the shiny new train station that they built. And then there's a restaurant cluster right where all the highways come together called Crossroads, which was the place to be in the 90s. And a lot of the brands that were thriving then are not thriving now. And so that area has started to decline a little bit. We're looking at ways to revitalize that. So those are the big projects immediately. And then sometime in the distant future, there are 1,000 acres that have not been developed that belong to DFW International Airport. So we have to come to an agreement on what we want to build on that shared land, which is a little more complex because there's a lot of decision makers when it comes to that.
Oh, yeah, especially with the airport like that. Why do you think, I was thinking about this when you were sharing communication in the economic development, strategic execution, achievement roles.
Strategic?
For a brief moment, it was like you were holding a diploma.
I had it.
Like
I had the diploma, and then it just whittled away.
You said economic development.
Gust of wind just took that diploma.
I had it. I'm sorry. I lost it. Why do you think, because I'm compelled by this, why do you think storytelling is so compelling or powerful for people? Like, regardless of your belief, regardless of someone's belief system. You know, we said community, not isolating yourself, how we need each other. I think a lot of people can get on board with that. They may not know exactly the whys. Why do you think, though, communication, that storytelling is so effective? Because you do more of the storytelling personally. I mean, you're involved in many different things. You have a creative mind, writing maybe a book or multiple books.
Working on a novel.
Yeah. So why is storytelling, what is your opinion on that? Like, why do you think that's so effective?
So there's a couple of things, and we'll start with the theological foundation first, and people who aren't Christians are welcome to disagree, but
yeah,
I think we were designed by a God who built us in his image, and he's a storyteller. He's crafting a grand narrative for his glory. And so being built in his image, at least partially, means that we process in the same way.
Yeah.
We connect to narrative. But even if you back away from the theological side of things and you look at what we know about the function of the human mind, all people are wired for narrative. And it's funny because I talked about how I'm a emotional processor versus a logical processor,
Yeah.
right? Everyone is an emotional processor.
Sure.
The question is really how quickly do you get to logic and how much does logic weigh in?
Yeah.
Because your first reaction to anything is always going to be emotional. That's why we, in some ways, have the problems that we have, because people get angry about something.
Yep.
And even if they don't have the logic to explain why they're angry, they know that they are angry. And so they have to do something about it.
Yep.
And it's really easy to manipulate and hack that in some bad ways. And unfortunately, that's profitable.
Sure.
So
Sure. Yeah.
sometimes we get a little carried away in the narrative. But the way the human brain is structured, you're going to process everything emotionally first and then sort it into buckets. And we sort it into buckets for reaction by comparing it to experience. We're narrative creatures. We want to build a sense of understanding and a coherent worldview from the things that we have seen and experienced and the data that we've collected, which is why sometimes, even if the numbers say one thing, it's hard to convince someone who's experienced differently that that thing is true because it flies in the face of what they've been through. So narrative is an essential part of the human experience, and it's very important for us as we develop to be telling stories that bring people together,
Yeah.
stories that promote healing, stories that identify and elevate the positive aspects of humanity and creation, and more importantly, our designer, and that problematize those things that are broken. And I think it's interesting that we get to a point where people are kind of on a knife's edge following COVID, right? Because we had all this time
Sure.
where everybody was separated and we were processing the world narratively from our little individual bubbles without a whole lot of outside context.
Yeah.
And then we come out of that primed and ready to go. And now it's really hard for us to figure out which narratives are actually accurate and which ones are ones that we've told ourselves. And we have all of this media that is only seeking to elevate the things that will produce a strong reaction, not necessarily that will generate good and healthy growth in us. And that's why I think it's important for us to tell stories with that goal in mind, because a compelling story is one thing, but a beneficial story might not be the same.
Do you think we've come out of COVID? I mean, Chris, this question is to you as well. Do you think we've come out of COVID more stronger in our opinions in a way that, you know, we're off in our bubbles? Now we've come out, like you said, ready to go. We're primed, but we're like so affected by it that any narrative that challenges maybe our experience coming out of 2020, like the beloved 2020, you know, congratulations on getting married, by the way. A lot of other things happened that year. But
I actually had a pretty good 2020.
you're like, it was pretty great for me.
It was pretty weird.
But I
That's
feel
a
like
great story to tell.
I know I could be wrong on this, but I do feel like people have come out their opinions. It seems stronger.
A lot of polarization.
Yeah, it seems a little harsher coming out of that, and I wonder if that's also because you're kind of pent up energy, and then you just come out like rah. It's just much more fierce in your stance taking kind of a thing.
Yeah, and so I'm going to be the annoying guy who, because in economics, you're dealing with complex systems that have a whole lot of inputs.
Yeah,
it's never one solution.
yeah,
It's never one thing.
sure.
I do think a lot of forces sort of came together and coalesced around the pandemic because we were sheltered in place, because we were a little bit cut off. I don't think that caused issues. I think it accelerated issues that we were already creating for ourselves.
Yeah.
So if you look demographically at the way that our country has been shifting, a lot of people have been voluntarily self-isolating within same people groups. And psychologically, we know if you're in a group of people who all agree with you, you will all become more radical in your stance because all you're hearing is feedback that you are correct and you should feel what you are feeling. And gosh darn it, someone has to do something about all this.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so easy for groups of people to be whipped up into a frenzy that they would never see themselves being in that space until they get isolated and all of those things happen. So we've had the compounding effects of social media, of a culture that was already cocooning and isolating even before we had to for health and safety reasons. And then you compound it with a social media ecosystem that's only going to feed you things that agree with you. And you have to really go out of your way to find an alternative point of view.
Yep.
And even when you do, it's uncomfortable and maybe you don't want to stay there for very long.
Yeah,
You
it's
feel kind of
challenging.
icky.
Yeah.
So I think we get to a point where we're reinforcing our own narratives, and that can create a dangerous psychology for us.
I think that's great. Summarization. What did you say? The surmised? He surmised that.
I say a lot of words wrong. You said Did you say problematize earlier?
Problematize?
Did you hear that word? I loved that word. I said
that too.
surmise instead of just whatever. Just keep talking.
Anyway, great summary of the COVID years.
Yes!
As somebody who's high empathy and somebody who's seen different walks of life coming together in a community environment there, that has to just bother you a little bit when people are not kind of embracing and trying to understand a little bit more their common man here who's who's living and breathing and walking and doing life right next to him. And so just being in this position there where you do have carte blanche there in a lot of ways, I would imagine, to tell stories. What's the one story that you're wanting to tell that you think would be very helpful here as you see Grapevine? It could be Grapevine related, or it could be something else related to just life. But what's that story that's just eating at you that you want to tell?
Yeah. And so that's the challenge of the job being high empathy is that I will cry at my desk a lot, more so at Six Stones than at City Hall. Fortunately, our economy in Grapevine's in pretty good shape, so there's not a lot of tragedy. But it was not uncommon to find me weeping over my laptop in my office at Six Stones because the interview itself is so highly emotional. You're really connecting with someone and you're trying to live their experience and ask them good questions to draw their experience out so that you can capture it for other people. You kind of end up going down an emotional rabbit hole. And that's my personality already, is that I'm a sponge. So I'll pick up whatever you're throwing at me and I'm going to give it back to you. I'm going to match wherever you are. So if you're in a great mood, I'm in a great mood. If you're depressed, I'm depressed. So that's already a challenge. And then to try to package that in a way that it's healthy and upbuilding for the people around me is a challenge too. And that's something that I find myself grappling with, especially recently, that the way that I do things naturally is not necessarily the best way. And so it's important for me to have a level of humility and acknowledge that, like, just because I feel compassion for people does not mean that people who don't feel compassion are bad. In some ways, compassion can be dangerous because it can lead me to rationalize really unhealthy behavior. So it's important to have moderating forces. And I think that's something to keep in mind when you're storytelling. And that's the other challenge, is that there are very few singular stories that capture the holistic human experience and address it from enough perspectives to really have the kind of impact that you would want to have. I can think of maybe one, and it took 66 books to unfold. So when you're looking for one story to sum it all up, you're going to run into a challenge. So I think for me, the important thing is to have sort of an arsenal, an archive of stories that address specific points. So what is the story that is relevant to this scenario that can help this person where they are, or that can help explain this factor? And again, I want to make sure that it's truthful, that the data backs it up, that it's well contextualized. And every now and again, if we can get really communications nerdy for a second, there's a hot debate about whether rhetoric creates a situation or responds to it. So Are you causing something to be by speaking about it in a way that makes people feel things about it?
Yeah.
Or is it your duty to look at a situation and respond to it in a way that will mobilize people? I generally fall on the latter side. I generally think that we're responding to events as they are. So you want to build a series of narratives that help you address whatever the issue is. And from there, you can kind of communicate to each individual person what it is that they need to hear. And every now and again, there is something large enough that it's important to go out and hunt for the story that addresses it. So one of the things we're working on now at the city is that crossroads area where all the highways come together. The generally accepted public narrative is that they rerouted the highways in that area, and that's what killed the businesses. We're starting to assemble data and perform analysis to ask if that's really what happened. Is it more complicated than that? And again, the answer is always, it's never just one thing.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. 100%.
I know one of the really neat stories just from being a soccer fan and about actually meeting the need in the area is the Liga that you're very instrumental in helping to see come to fruition. So I know that's a labor of love of yours. And so please just describe for those who aren't familiar with that program, what led to that, and what you've seen as the fruit of that.
So I am the self-appointed commissioner of an intramural soccer program called Liga HEB, which is another Six Stones program that, again, was something that they said yes to in the early formative phases. So in 2010, the school district came to Six Stones and said, we have all these kids who are underperforming. They don't care enough to show up to class. Their grades aren't where they should be. We think they're fully capable kids. They just don't have a reason to care. A lot of them are ESL. So we think maybe if we give them soccer, which is not a UIL sport, at least at the junior high level in the Hurst Euless Bedford Independent School District or most districts around here, if we give them that sport as a form of motivation, we tell them they can play as long as they're passing, we think it'll help. So Six Stones launched a program that for a long time we wrote a check to a junior high, and the people at the junior high figured out how to do it. I made the mistake of wearing a soccer jersey into the office one day. Suddenly I'm appointed
You're immediately
to
commissioner.
run this program.
Yep.
So the first thing I did was call all of the coaches and the volunteers and the key administrators together and just ask them, what is this program? What have I inherited?
Yeah.
Describe to me a day in the intramural soccer program. And one of the coaches said, well, we usually start practice when the kids show up with the ball. Singular. If you're not familiar with soccer, rule of thumb is you want to have one ball for every two players.
Una pelota.
At that point, we had probably 80 to 100 kids in the program.
With one ball.
And we're talking about like one ball per campus,
Yeah.
maybe a couple or like a bag, and they're half deflated.
Wow.
So that was step one, was just like get the equipment and everything in order. So in that meeting, I kind of got the sense that everyone was sort of just in their bubble doing their own thing. And I was like, does anyone mind if I appoint myself commissioner and just start like running the show? I just basically need to call myself that so that I can send fundraising emails. And they were like, yeah, sounds good. Please do that. So I took it over. I rebranded it. At the time it was intramural soccer. I decided it needed to have a cooler name. It needed to be Liga HEB. And the team names were like Hurst Red and Central Blue. And I was like, that is lame.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
so we modeled all the team names off professional teams. We had the students vote on what names they wanted. We had the students submit their own designs for their team crests
Exciting.
because we wanted to have them have buy-in, because that's the most important part of the program is they're connecting with someone who cares about them, that's going to check in with them, that is a good mentor figure, and they have a reason to feel like they're part of the school. And those two things together have done incredible things for these kids, and I take zero credit. It's the volunteers, it's the coaches that are out there in the trenches with the kids every day, really investing in them. But we've seen a student population that is primarily at-risk kids, some of whom barely speak English, but they speak soccer. They have a 97% attendance rate at school.
Wow.
Their grades are at or above the average of their peers, and their behavioral issues are cut in half when the season starts. These are kids that have no sense that they belong And all they need is a group of people with a shared interest.
Yeah.
That level of community that we talked about.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to watch these kids. We had a kid last year who was named the MVP of the league. In 7th grade, he was so shy. We scheduled him a game in the stadium, and he missed it. He skipped the whole thing because he didn't want to play in front of a crowd. He was scared. They found him like hiding in the locker room.
Wow.
2 years later, he's leading a team in the championship game. This is a kid that was completely disconnected, and all he needed was for someone to give him a place to shine and invest in him and teach him a truth that we all believe, that he's created in the image of a beautiful and perfect God, and he has inherent value.
Yeah.
And to watch the impact that that relationship has on these kids is huge. I cry.
Oh, yeah. No, that's amazing.
That is an amazing. I mean, that's tying all those things that you talked about early on that made you want to help and want to make an impact, and something like that you never know how that's going to impact him for years on end, and you get to be a part of that. And again, it's just meeting a need. It's meeting a community need, and taking a step out, raising your hand, saying, make me a commissioner. Let's get some things behind it. That's a great story.
Yeah. Oh, and we talked about, too, how we're all wired with different skills and abilities, right? Like the human body needs all the different pieces of the body to work together. It's another reason why we can't be isolated. So I just, we just thank you for your time, but I personally just think your passion that's always been there, and in so many different ways, but your willingness to take a step to see how the Lord's going to establish your steps along the way. A lot of people are afraid to take that first step to go be established and see what's going on. And it's like you have this sacking groceries and knocking yourself over with the cart, or really much more importantly, just the radio and communication and knocking on doors, having a lunch, walking into a Six Stones and just being like, hey, I see a solution. Like, let me help you. There's so many people who will never, they never do that. And then all these roles and the way the Lord's been using you because you've took those steps. I'm just really encouraged by that, because I think it says a lot about you. And I'm also encouraged you're out there taking steps, and you're in economic development. You're in areas that, I'm never going to be in. Maybe Chris will be in there someday. Chris isn't going to be in there. But it's just encouraging, because I think that's all we can do. We can take one step at a time. We see what the Lord continues to do, and he gets to write the story. Right,
to be part of it.
Yeah, he's ultimately narrating that. So anyway, thank you for that. Yeah. And it's super cool for you to share, and even with the commissioner, we should have just called you Commish. Why didn't we start with the Commish?
Yeah, I picked a bad street name. That should have been it.
That should have been.
They're actually like the superintendent of Hershey Bedford ISD refers to me as the Commish.
I think, speaking of the Commish, let's move the Commish to. Wow, that was louder than I thought it was going to be in my ears. Yeah. I'm sorry, everyone. To lightning round, yes. Here we go. The way it goes is we're going to alternate questions back and forth, rapid fire. You cannot think, okay? You cannot think at all.
Mike, we're going to,
I don't know if you know what you're asking me to do.
We want emotional responses only.
Why don't you just run through the questions?
You want me to run through all of them? I want you to
run through the questions.
Okay, I'm going to go fast. Here we go, Commish. Ready for this? If you can see any music artist in concert, who do you pick?
Okay, so I've already seen him like a billion times. Andrew McMahon.
Andrew McMahon, okay. Man. East Coast or West Coast?
My whole family's on the East Coast. It's got to be there.
Is that your answer? Okay. Mountains or beach?
So I am a beach person. My wife is a mountain person. So we split time when we vacation.
You got to pick one, though. Sorry.
I believe it's my job to sacrifice for my wife.
Wow. Good answer.
I thought you were going to say North Carolina.
Great answer. Great answer, Commish. Okay. Greatest sports team ever assembled?
Greatest sports team ever assembled?
Got to be a soccer team.
Oh, man. There were some pretty dominant ones.
Clock is ticking.
The U.S. women's team had just a heck of a run.
Best sports team ever assembled?
When they started.
Okay.
Relative to the sport,
okay,
they dominated everybody. They defined that sport for decades.
And we have an audience of women here on the podcast who will appreciate that answer.
Yes,
thank you so much. Best pizza.
We appreciate them.
Hey, don't get in the way of this. Best pizza in DFW.
Oh, I have to pick a grapevine business because otherwise I get
They're
in
listening.
so much
They
trouble.
are listening.
Here it
So
comes.
say it.
There is a wonderful new pizza place on Main Street that opened last year. It's called Mr. 01 Pizza.
Oh,
It's called that because he got an 01 special immigration visa for genius in pizza making.
Whoa, my word.
How could you not go there?
I need
Yeah.
to go there. How come
If
I've
you
never
haven't
been
been,
there
you
before?
gotta go.
Okay, coffee or tea?
I used to be a tea person. I'm a coffee person now because I went on a mission trip to Costa Rica.
That's all you needed right there. Dallas Stars or Dallas Cowboys?
You know what? I'm a fan of the underdogs. I'm a fan of the underrepresented sports teams. So Stars all over.
Okay, thank you. Almost done. Dogs or cats?
I'm a dog person.
Run, thank you, as you should be. Running or lifting?
Oh, I run. I do not.
I do not lift.
Lifting ends badly for me.
Favorite comedian?
Oh, that
boom.
varies by
Very challenging.
By emotion.
Every 5 minutes.
Yeah, I really like Mike Birbiglia.
I thought you were going to say Mike Wazowski.
Mike
okay.
Birbiglia. He has like an incredible narrative format where he's just telling you a story and you forget that he's even a comedian for 10 minutes and then he'll just punch you in the kidney with joy.
With joy and
With
love.
joy.
Everyone
it's
likes
side-splitting in so many ways.
Wazowski is funny, though.
I kind of thought I heard that.
That one
Everyone
joke.
wants a piece of blood getting punched in the kidney. Last two. If you were a superhero, who would you be?
I mean, I would still be me. I'd just be a superhero.
Wow.
Empathy man.
Empathy man. The commish. We call you the commish.
Yes, sir.
You know, it's funny because when I got the chance to like make up my own superpower, that was what I picked. Was like
See,
the ability to absorb and transfer emotions. So
My
like, I can make
superpower is a
people
mind
feel
reader,
better.
so I just knew you were going to.
Empathy man. EM. Last question. Drum roll, Chris. Give us the drum roll.
Ran a bonus
If
question after that.
someone, oh wow, if someone were to, you gonna keep going? If someone were to narrate your life story, speaking of narration, who would it be?
Oh boy, I have to pick one narrator.
One. Can't have a hodgepodge.
Is it bad that my first instinct is Snoop Dogg? Have you seen him do the
Stephen
animal
Jones.
videos? They're incredible.
It is not at all terrible. That's your first instinct. I think that is the
Snoop
answer.
back to my life.
I think we go for Snoop Dogg. The commish, DJ Stevie J, Steve J, Snoop Dogg narration.
J, the commish.
That's it. You are relieved, except you said a bonus question.
Favorite Premier League team?
Okay, so I grew up, like, MLS was founded when I was 6. So I grew up on Major League Soccer. I don't have a Premier League team that I follow.
Favorite MLS team?
FC Dallas, obviously.
Obviously.
I'm Dallas till I
Well,
die.
Dallas
never know.
until he's dead.
Just never know.
Clearly. Wow. Well, Stephen Jones, thank you.
Yes.
You're off the hot seat. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Your time. Any last words as we go out for the commish?
Economic development.
Wow, he got so much smarter.
I think if we just say that on the way out, economic development really is key for the execution of today's strategies in America.
I can feel the economy developing
Word.
as we speak.
Right.
Thank you for your service, gentlemen.
Thanks so much for joining us. Please consider rating and reviewing our podcast and hitting subscribe on whichever platform you prefer. Remember to keep moving forward because we're not quite there.